Cuban Missile Crisis, Kennedy versus Khrushchev. We have researched this topic and have discovered some interesting things to share with you. There was a lot of debate over this topic, and there still is. Cuban Missile Crisis is just one part in the Cold War, and the main people that we see in this is Nikita Khrushchev, trying to rule the world, and John F. Kennedy, trying to stop the Soviets and Khrushchev. It has a very diplomatic ending in which the U.S. and the Soviets just stop the fights, and it comes down to a conversation between the two powerful men.
What happened before the crisis? The invasion of Bay of Pigs was the first step to stopping the Soviets from taking control of the land around the U.S. The point of the Bay of the Pigs invasion was the U.S. were going to overthrow Castro and the dictatorship of Cuba. The problem was that the invasion did not work and most of the men were captured. They were put into prisons until they were let out, and the U.S. had to buy their men back from Cuba and bring them back to the United States. Basically, the United States was humiliated at the fact that they were found out.
The debate over what to do with Cuba was up to Kennedy and the three options that he could choose from. The first option was to block Cuba from Russia and the rest of the world so they couldn't get any more weapons or anything else into Cuba. The second option was that they could settle with the United Nations and sit back and watch what happened around them. The third option was that they could invade Cuba, which they already tried and failed, but the invasion would lead to a nuclear war between the few countries surrounding them and would basically destroy them all.
The reason why there was a crisis between the two countries was that the U.S. found proof of missiles in Cuba that the Soviets had planted there. U-2 spy planes from the U.S. captured images of construction bases being built and the missiles being shipped in suspicious part of Cuba. Kennedy knew Khrushchev was allied with Castro, and he accused Khrushchev of planting the missiles in Cuba. But Khrushchev denied ever having anything to do with Cuba and the missiles that were there.
The two sides of the debate around the crisis were Kennedy and Khrushchev's different ideas. Kennedy knew that Russia had a base in Cuba. The U.S. had a base in Turkey, which put Khrushchev on end. If the U.S. used the base in Turkey, the Soviets would use the Cuban base to attack the U.S. The bases also protected Castro from attacks by the U.S. The U.S. was ready to attack Soviets at any time, and Khrushchev wanted to have that power over the U.S.
The Soviets' answer to the U.S. was that Khrushchev sent letters telling Kennedy to remove his men in the blockade from Cuba and he would remove the missiles. But the U.S. couldn't invade Cuba or try to kill Castro. Before Kennedy could reply, Khrushchev sent another letter demanding that Kennedy removes the weapons from Turkey and he would remove their missiles from Cuba. In the end, Kennedy agreed to the first letter and went out in public and told them about their agreement over the letters.
Kennedy's announcement to the world helped ease the tension throughout the U.S. when he told them that he and Khrushchev had come to an agreement. Kennedy would take out the blockade from Cuba, the Soviets promised to take the nuclear missiles out from the Cuban base, and the U.S. promised that they will not kill Castro.
Within the past week, unmistakable evidence has established the fact that a series of offensive missile sites is now in preparation on that imprisoned island. The purpose of these bases can be none other than to provide a nuclear strike capability against the Western Hemisphere. The Soviet government would never become involved in rendering such assistance, unquote. That statement also was false. I have directed that the following initial steps be taken immediately. To halt this offensive buildup, a strict quarantine on all offensive military equipment under shipment to Cuba is being initiated. All ships of any kind bound for Cuba, from whatever nation or port, where they're found to contain cargoes of offensive weapons, be turned back. It shall be the policy of this nation to regard any nuclear missile launched from Cuba against any nation in the Western Hemisphere as an attack by the Soviet Union on the United States, requiring a full retaliatory response upon the Soviet Union. Our goal is not the victory of might, but the vindication of right. Not peace at the expense of freedom, but both peace and freedom.
What happened after the crisis? On November 20th, the bombers left Cuba and Russia, easing the tension throughout the world. Kennedy lifted the blockade from Cuba. Many think that if Kennedy didn't agree to Khrushchev on the first letter, a nuclear war would have surfaced. Diplomacy saved us from a war that could have been fatal to the Earth. Kennedy was seen as an American hero for stopping a potential nuclear war. Even though at one point the Cold War was over, we still had many battles to overcome. One thing that we learned from the diplomacy is that it can either save us or destroy us when it comes to things like what happened in the Cuban Missile Crisis. In this case, we were lucky to get away unscathed, but will we be so fortunate next time?